Daniel Cleffel knelt in salt. Not clean salt. Not the kind that preserved food or flavored memory. This salt was old, ground down from mountains that had already forgotten their names. It bit into skin and crept into wounds with a patient cruelty, the kind that didn't rush because it didn't need to. The chains around Daniel's wrists clinked softly as he shifted his weight. The sound was swallowed almost immediately by the wind, which never stopped here. It scraped across the flats in low, whispering waves, dragging dust and white grit along the ground like a living thing. Someone kicked him in the ribs. Hard. Daniel grunted, the breath driven from his lungs in a wet, choking sound. For a moment, black spots burst behind his eyes. He tasted copper and salt, sharp and familiar. He laughed. It surprised them. The scavenger who'd kicked him hesitated, boots still raised, eyes narrowing in confusion. Laughter wasn't part of the script. Pain was supposed to be loud. Fear was supposed to beg. Daniel coughed again, then forced himself upright inch by inch, chains rattling. As he did, his sleeve shifted. A small metal ring slipped free. It hit the white ground with a soft ping. It rolled once, twice, then settled. No one saw. Daniel lowered his head, lips split, blood running freely now. He murmured, barely audible even to himself. 3 rings left. The mob surged around him. 30 scavengers, bone-thin and sun-scorched, their skin cracked and darkened by a sky that never forgave. They beat drums made of stretched hide and scavenged alloy, wrapped hands thudding out a rhythm that wasn't music so much as hunger-given tempo. Boom, boom, boom. Above them, the sky was a sickly yellow, choked with dust that never settled. The sun was a pale smear behind it, like a bruise that never healed. This was Carset Salt. No cities, no borders, just flat white death and the things desperate enough to live on it. Daniel had not meant to come here. That was the lie everyone told themselves. Among the scavengers walked her. She moved differently. No swagger. No wild gestures. No need to prove anything. Where the others lurched and postured, she flowed. A steady, predatory grace that made the crowd unconsciously part around her as she passed. Her skin carried a blue tint beneath the dust, catching the harsh light in a way that made her look carved from the same salt and stone as the desert itself. Her eyes were black and unblinking. She watched Daniel the way a hunter watches water, patient, assessing, already imagining what would be left behind. The drums slowed. She stopped in front of him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she crouched, close enough that Daniel could see the faint scar line along her jaw. Old. Clean. Not from this place. You laugh, she said, her voice calm, almost curious. Galactic common, spoken carefully. Most scream. Daniel swallowed. His throat burned. Waste of air, he said hoarsely. A ripple of anger passed through the crowd. A few scavengers stepped forward, weapons raised. She lifted one hand. They stopped. Her gaze never left Daniel. You are human, she said. Not a question. Last I checked. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. You crossed 3 territories to reach the flats. You carried no weapons. No escort. Daniel met her eyes. I was counting on hospitality. A few of the scavengers laughed, sharp, barking sounds with no humor in them. She didn't. You were counting on something else, she said. Daniel said nothing. Silence stretched. The wind howled. Finally, she stood. Chain him to the marker, she ordered. If he survives the night, we decide if he's worth more. Hands grabbed Daniel again. Rough. Efficient. They dragged him across the salt, the ground tearing at his knees, reopening wounds that hadn't finished closing. They bound him to a rusted metal post half buried in the flats. Old survey marker, its symbols long sandblasted away. When they stepped back, Daniel sagged forward, forehead resting against the cool metal. The drums resumed. Night fell slowly on Carset Salt. The scavengers believed the desert would finish him. Most things didn't last a night here. The cold came first. It sank into bones, leached warmth until muscles shook and teeth rattled. Then came the salt winds, slicing exposed skin raw, carrying dust fine enough to clog lungs if you breathed wrong. Daniel breathed carefully. He counted heartbeats. He ignored the pain as best he could. And he waited. Because this was not his first bad place. He had grown up on a mining station that lost pressure twice a year. He had served on relief ships that arrived too late and stayed anyway. He had learned that survival wasn't about strength. It was about choosing what to give up. At some point in the night, a shape approached. Soft steps. Controlled. She stopped just outside arm's reach. "You should be dead," she said quietly. Daniel opened one eye. Disappointing. She studied him in the dim starlight. Interesting. She crouched again, closer this time. He could smell her, dust, metal, something sharp and clean beneath it. "You are bait," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "You noticed." Her eyes flicked to the empty horizon. "For whom?" "For whoever's listening," Daniel replied. "And for whoever you've convinced yourselves doesn't care." She straightened slowly. "You think others will come for you?" "I know they will." She watched him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "You do not beg." Daniel exhaled. "Never learned how." The wind rose, howling louder now. She turned away. "Rest," she said over her shoulder. "Tomorrow we see what you are." As her footsteps faded, Daniel let his head fall back against the post. He closed his eyes. And far, beyond the salt flats, beyond the dust-choked sky, a signal finally reached someone who understood exactly what it meant. Morning on Karseth Salt did not arrive. It simply happened. The sky lightened from bruised yellow to a paler sickness, as if the world had decided not to bother pretending it could be anything else. The wind never stopped. It only changed its mind about direction. Daniel woke to pain. Not the sharp kind that had burned itself out hours ago. This was the dull, all-encompassing ache that lived in joints and marrow, the reminder that the body kept accounts even when the mind tried to forget. He opened his eyes slowly. Salt crusted his lashes. His lips were cracked enough that moving them felt like tearing paper. He was still alive. That, apparently, disappointed the scavengers. They gathered at a distance, murmuring among themselves, throwing glances his way like gamblers watching a bad hand refuse to fold. A few looked annoyed. One or two looked unsettled. People did not survive the marker. Not without water. Not without shelter. Not without permission. The woman with blue-tinted skin arrived last. She carried no weapon this time. That, more than anything, made the others uneasy. She stopped a few steps from Daniel and studied him as if checking a calculation that refused to balance. "You lived," she said. Daniel's voice came out rough. "I try." She crouched, eye level again. Up close, the lines on her face were clearer now. Old sun damage, healed cuts, the marks of someone who had earned every day she was still breathing. "My people call this mercy," she said, gesturing to the open flats. "The desert decides. We do not waste blood." Daniel swallowed. "Efficient." "Honest," she corrected. "More honest than cages." She reached out and brushed a finger against the chain at his wrist, testing its tension. "You are not strong," she said. "Not cruel. Just factual. You are not fast. You are not adapted to this world." "No," Daniel agreed. "Then why are you still here?" The scavengers leaned in, drums quiet now. Even the wind seemed to listen. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and answered truthfully. "Because leaving would have been worse." A ripple of discomfort passed through the group. She frowned slightly. "Explain." "There are places," Daniel said slowly, choosing words that didn't hurt too much to say, "where people get forgotten. Places where suffering is normal enough that no one thinks to ask why it's happening." He lifted his head a little. "Those places don't get better on their own." Silence. One of the scavengers snorted. "Human thinks he fixes desert with words." Daniel turned his head toward the voice. "No," he said. "I fix it by standing where you can't ignore me." The woman studied him again. "Unchain him," she said suddenly. The crowd erupted. Shouts. Protests. A few angry drumbeats. "He's bait," someone yelled. "He's weak," another snarled. "He's nothing." She raised her hand. The noise died instantly. "Unchain him," she repeated. If he runs, shoot him. No one moved for a heartbeat. Then a scavenger stepped forward, key clutched tight, and unlocked the chains. Daniel slumped forward as the weight came off his wrists. His hands shook as blood rushed back into them. He took a slow breath, fighting the urge to collapse. She stepped back, giving him space. "Walk," she said. Daniel pushed himself upright. It took longer than it should have. His legs wobbled, threatened betrayal. He steadied himself, one step at a time, boots crunching softly in the salt. He did not run. That earned him something like curiosity. They led him into the camp, a scattering of scavenged shelters made from wreckage, bone, and old alloy plating. Fires burned low and smokeless. Water was rationed carefully, every drop watched. Children stared at him with wide, dark eyes. That was new. The woman noticed his glance. "We keep them alive," she said. "That is not easy here." "I know," Daniel said quietly. They stopped near a central fire pit. The drums resumed, slower now, less hostile. Ritual, not threat. The woman faced him. "My name is Sale," she said. "You will speak when asked. You will eat if offered. You will not lie." Daniel nodded. "Fair." She studied him for a long moment. "You are not afraid enough," she said. Daniel met her gaze. "You're not cruel enough." That earned him the faintest twitch of her lips. The scavengers began to argue among themselves, voices raised, sharp gestures. Sale listened without interrupting. Finally, she spoke. "He stays," she said. "For now." A few snarled, but none challenged her. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had crossed the first threshold. That night, Sale returned alone. She handed him a cup. Water. His hands trembled as he took it. He forced himself to sip slowly. Greed would kill him faster than thirst. "You have 3 days," she said. "For what?" "For your people to come," she replied. "Or for us to decide you are worth more dead than alive." Daniel nodded. "That's generous." She watched him drink. "You think they will risk themselves for one human?" "I know they will," Daniel said. "Why?" He looked down at the cup, then back up at her. "Because humans are bad at math," he said softly. "We don't calculate worth very well." She studied his face, searching for mockery, deception. Found none. Sale stood. "If no one comes," she said, "I will end it quickly." Daniel met her eyes. "I'd appreciate that." She hesitated. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why did you bring no weapon?" Daniel considered the question. "Because if I had," he said, "you would have killed me before you listened." She turned away without another word. As she walked back into the firelight, Daniel leaned against the shelter wall, exhaustion finally claiming him. Far above, beyond dust and salt and sky, the signal grew louder, and something vast, patient, and very human began to move. Sale had not meant to think about him. That was the first mistake. Uncarsed salt, thinking too much about anything that didn't keep you alive was a luxury. Regret dried you out faster than thirst. Curiosity got you killed. Mercy, real mercy, was a story parents told children who didn't survive long enough to become dangerous. And yet, as Sale moved through the camp that night, her thoughts kept circling back to the human. Daniel Kleffel. He slept poorly. She knew that without seeing him. Humans always did here. The desert spoke to them too loudly, through cold, through wind, through the endless white that reflected heat by day and stole warmth by night. Sale paused near the edge of the camp, scanning the flats out of habit. Nothing moved beyond the distant shimmer of heat distortion. No raiders. No storms yet. She exhaled. "You're losing sharpness," she muttered to herself. That was the second mistake. Daniel woke to voices. Not angry ones. Not yet. He lay still, eyes closed, listening. Years of fieldwork had taught him that pretending to sleep often revealed more than waking up ever could. 2 scavengers stood a few meters away, arguing in low tones. "He weakens us," one hissed. "He brings eyes," the other replied. "Eyes mean trouble." "He brings trade," the first countered. "If others come, we profit. If others come, we die." Daniel breathed evenly. They were both right. A shadow fell across his face. "Get up," Sale said. He opened his eyes and squinted against the light. Morning already? It's always morning here, she replied. Come. She led him beyond the main camp, toward a ridge of salt-crusted stone that broke the flats like a scar. He followed without comment, though every step sent pain flaring through his joints. At the ridge, she stopped. Below them lay the flats, endless, merciless, empty. You see this place, she said. What do you think it is? Daniel thought for a moment. A filter. Sale glanced at him. Explain. It removes anyone who doesn't adapt, he said. Not because they're bad. Just incompatible. She nodded slowly. We call it a judge. They stood in silence for a while. You don't belong here, Sale said finally. No, Daniel agreed. But I belong to people who will come here anyway. She turned to face him fully now. You think that makes you valuable? I think it makes me visible, he said. Sale studied him carefully. You are bait, she said again. But you do not thrash. Daniel smiled faintly. Thrashing scares fish away. Her eyes narrowed. You speak like a hunter. I grew up around storms, Daniel said. You learn patience or you drown. That earned a quiet, surprised huff from her. Come, she said again. This time, she led him somewhere the others didn't go. The children gathered near a shallow basin where brine collected overnight. It wasn't clean water, but filtered and boiled enough times, it kept them alive. Daniel noticed them immediately. Not because they were children, he'd seen too many in too many bad places, but because they were watching him. Not with fear, with curiosity. One of them, a small, sharp-faced girl with dust-streaked skin, stepped closer. Is he broken? She asked Sale bluntly. Daniel winced. Sale didn't correct her. Not yet, Sale replied. The girl considered that. He looked soft. Daniel coughed. I am. That surprised her. She squinted at him. Why? He thought about it. Because being hard all the time hurts, he said. She nodded, satisfied, and ran off. Sale watched the exchange in silence. You speak to them as equals, she said. They already are, Daniel replied. She looked away, uncomfortable. That was the third mistake. That afternoon, the storm came. It rose fast, a wall of white screaming across the flats. The scavengers moved with practiced urgency, securing shelters, anchoring equipment, herding children inside. Daniel helped without being told. He held a straining tarp in place with shaking arms. He shielded a child when a metal strut tore loose. He didn't complain when salt scoured his skin raw. Sale noticed. When the storm finally passed, leaving the world quieter but no less deadly, Daniel collapsed against a shelter wall, chest heaving. Sale crouched beside him. You didn't have to help, she said. Yes, he replied between breaths. I did. She studied his bloodied hands. You gain nothing. Daniel looked at the children huddled nearby. Safe. Then it's free, he said. She stared at him for a long time. Later that night, Sale sat alone by the fire, sharpening a blade she hadn't needed to use in years. One of the elders approached quietly. He will bring ruin, the elder said. Sale didn't look up. He will bring change. They are the same. No, Sale said softly. Ruin takes. Change asks. The elder frowned. And if his people come with guns? Sale finally met his gaze. Then we will learn what kind of people he belongs to. Daniel woke again to the sound of something new. Not drums. Not wind. A low, distant hum. He sat up slowly, heart pounding. Sale stood at the edge of the camp, staring skyward. The dust-choked clouds parted just enough to reveal a pinprick of light. Then another. Then several more. Daniel closed his eyes, relief washing through him like a tide. They heard, he whispered. Sale didn't look at him. They are many, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. But not for war. She turned slowly. How can you be sure? Daniel met her gaze, exhausted, battered, still standing. Because if they were, he said, I wouldn't be alive. The lights grew brighter. And for the first time since Sale could remember, the desert felt small. The lights in the distance grew brighter. Not stars. Not the faint glimmers of distant settlements. No, these were deliberate, living, human-made, moving as one across the salt flats. Daniel Kleffel stood on the ridge, wind lashing at him, salt grinding against skin and eyes. He watched them, his people, arriving not as a strike force, but as a river of intent, careful and synchronized, each step measured, each movement carrying the unspoken promise. We will not leave you here. Sail appeared beside him again. The blue-tinted skin glimmered under the harsh, early light. Her expression, ever so controlled, betrayed a flicker of awe. They've come, she said. Not a question. A statement. Daniel exhaled slowly. Yes. She looked at him. And you led them here? No, Daniel said softly. I only stayed. The scavengers were the first to notice. Their scattered group froze mid-task, heads tilting, ears straining. The distant hum became a low, rolling thunder across the flats. Not a storm. Not an attack. Footsteps, hundreds of them, pounding rhythmically against the salt, a cadence that carried both purpose and reassurance. A few of the younger scavengers whispered among themselves. They are many, one said. They are human, another replied. Confusion and wonder tangled in the words. Sail's black eyes followed Daniel as he stepped down the ridge. You gambled everything. I gambled nothing, he said. I stayed because hope isn't a thing you gamble. It's a thing you give time to find you. She studied him, and for the first time in her life, she felt a quiet shift. Something she could not name, something foreign to the logic of survival she had been raised on. The humans arrived in full now, but not with weapons drawn in menace. They carried supplies, water, blankets, small medical kits. Children from nearby settlements ran beside them, laughter ringing faintly, fragile against the howl of wind, yet unmistakably human. The scavengers' anger, their fear, their disdain began to falter. Their primitive understanding of strength, of worth, did not include this. One of the scavengers, a wiry woman with cracked skin, took a step forward. Why do they come for him? She whispered to no one in particular. Daniel approached unarmed, hands open, face smudged with sweat and salt. He knelt to meet the girl's scavenger's gaze. Because we know a life is never just one life, he said. It carries others with it unseen until they arrive. The wind shifted. The salt glittered like shattered glass. The light of the humans reflected off the scattered metal and stone, a brilliance that neither the scavengers nor Sail had seen before. Sail's hand went to her blade instinctively, but she did not unsheath it. She watched, observed. The humans approached the camp, and rather than conflict, they brought aid. Food, water, blankets. They lifted injured children from the edges of the camp. They tended to the weak. They spoke softly, gently, as if knowing exactly what needed to be done without demanding it. Daniel moved among them, coordinating quietly. Help him up, he whispered to one of the older humans. Cover the basin over there. Keep the fires low, safe. The scavengers began to murmur. One of the elder males, a hunched, ragged thing, finally stepped forward. These humans, they're not like us, he said. No, Sail admitted, voice low. They are something else entirely. Her eyes found Daniel's. You taught them nothing. They taught themselves through your endurance. Daniel shook his head faintly. No, he said. I only reminded them who we are. The humans worked in quiet efficiency, hands steady, voices calm. And as the day dragged on, the scavengers began to see it clearly. Humanity did not need to strike to demonstrate power. Humanity shaped the world by being human, by compassion, by patience, by persistence, by standing firm when every instinct screamed to flee or fight. One scavenger, the wiry woman, knelt beside a child Daniel had helped stabilize, offering water. The elder male, silent until now, looked on and murmured, We have misjudged them. Entirely. Sail turned away, her jaw tight. She had known the desert for decades. She had known cruelty and survival. She had seen warriors, thieves, killers. And yet these humans, by simple acts of endurance and care, had flipped the scale. Not by weapons, not by force, but by being a lifeline when none existed. Daniel knelt, looking out across the flats. They will stay, he said softly, because they understand what it is to be human. Sail's gaze softened, though she would never admit it aloud. Perhaps, she said, Perhaps there is merit in this odd resilience. The sun climbed pale and merciless, yet somehow rendered beautiful by the reflection off the white salt. Shadows stretched long, and the wind whispered a language Daniel could almost understand. And somewhere deep inside, the scavengers and Sail felt the undeniable truth forming, impossible to ignore. These humans were more than flesh and bone. They carried purpose and patience like weapons, sharper than any blade. Daniel exhaled. The humans around him laughed softly now, tending to the weak, offering warmth and sustenance. And, for the first time in memory, Karsit Salt felt less like a grave and more like a stage. A place where humanity could be seen. The Salt Flats did not forgive weakness. They never had, and they never would. Yet today, the Flats had witnessed something new, endurance that refused to be measured in strength, speed, or cruelty. Daniel Cleffel stood among the scavengers, among his people, amid children laughing softly and the slow crackle of fire. He looked at Sail. She was silent, blade sheathed, eyes reflecting a light she could not name. "Your people," she said, voice quiet, almost reverent. They came for one human." "They came because one human stayed," Daniel replied. His hands were still raw, blistered, but his chest swelled with quiet pride. "We stay for each other. That is the difference." The scavengers watched. Some shook their heads, still confused. Some nodded slowly, understanding in the way survival teaches recognition, even if belated. Children moved freely now, exploring what little life the Flats could sustain. One small girl approached Daniel cautiously. She held something in her hand, a toy, a rusted, battered thing, one that had likely belonged to another world, another child long forgotten. Daniel knelt. She offered it to him, without words. He smiled gently. "Thank you," he said. The girl grinned, stepping back into the warmth of the human group. The scavengers noticed. Something subtle but profound passed through them, a gesture so small, yet so full of weight. Sail studied the scene. She had survived decades in the harshest lawless desert, understood predatory grace and the cold logic of survival. And yet, she could not dismiss this feeling, the feeling that humanity had done something impossible here. "They survive," she murmured. "Not because they fight, but because they endure, because they give." Daniel looked out across the flats. The wind stirred salt in soft eddies, carrying a scent of something older than memory, older than pain, older than fear. "They survive," he said softly, "because they choose to care, even when it costs them everything." The scavengers began to gather closer, drawn not by fear, not by obligation, but by the realization that humanity's value was not something you could measure. It was something you felt in action, in patience, in courage that did not scream, but persisted quietly, steadily. Sail lowered her eyes, uncharacteristically moved. "Perhaps," she said, voice low, "there is something in this humanity that even the desert cannot destroy." Daniel nodded. "We endure. We adapt. We care." And that he gestured to the humans around him, to the children, to the scavengers now hesitating at the edge of understanding. That is what makes us human. Above, the sky began to clear, sunlight refracting off the salt in gold and silver glimmers. For the first time in years, Karsit Salt seemed less like a prison and more like a witness to the quiet, unstoppable, impossible nature of humanity. The scavengers would speak of this day for years. They would tell stories of the human who endured, of the tribe who arrived for one life, of the grace and patience that turned fear into wonder. And Sail, the predator who had walked the flats for decades, would remember one man who did not flinch, who did not fight, who did not flee, and how that single human had changed everything. Daniel watched the children run, heard the laughter, felt the warmth of his people gathering water, blankets, and supplies for the vulnerable. He let himself feel something he had almost forgotten: hope. And in that moment he understood fully, completely, that humanity's power was never in domination or violence. It was in resilience, in choice, in courage born of compassion, in the ability to endure and inspire all at once. He turned to Sail. "Do you understand now?" She nodded slowly. "I think I do." He smiled softly. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. The wind whispered through the salt. The sun gleamed on rusted metal, blistered skin, and faces flushed with relief and awe. The flats were alive with stories now, stories of a human who stood when none else could, who stayed when leaving was easier, and who reminded all who watched that compassion is stronger than any weapon. The end. Outro narration prompt optional. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.